Lovely, thanks everyone. Well, thank you for coming to this session around the UK. I'll just do some quick intros first. You might have heard from me if you were here yesterday. I'm the General Manager of a UK trade association called aimm. We have members throughout the value chain, and what we look to do is further commercial growth in the industry, but also help our members navigate the regulatory environment in which we operate. So this panel is perfect. I've got a team of experts from the UK here, so I'm going to start by asking them just to briefly introduce themselves. If we start with Victoria and work along.
Let me just check this is working. Yes, it is. Hi, everybody. I'm Victoria Hull. I work at Dynamic Mobile Billing based out of the UK. We're a UK aggregator. We've been in the market for over 25 years. And my role is Business Development Director, and it's basically to look at optimising flows within the UK and delivering, obviously, growth and new business. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Leon. Good morning, all. I'm from Sam Media. We are a merchant. We sell virtual reality, extended reality, entertainment products on mobile phones, and we're active for quite a while already in the UK market.
I'm David Ashman. I head the compliance at MCP Insight. Most people, I think, now have come across us in terms of our fraud monitoring products, our ad monitoring, and our service test support to get things live. But specifically in the UK, we've been working very closely with the mobile networks, with EE and O2 and 3. Following the 15th code and pioneering the due diligence work, which is, I think, very central to a real direction of travel in the UK. And also, I do all the sort of back-end support to make sure our guys are trained up to mark things effectively, understand the rules and the nuances, the subtleties of the rules in each country, because to write them down, they all look the same, but to actually, in practice, they can vary. So taking that knowledge of training our guys and just trying to put that into some best practice along with aimm to help educate everybody else with what we're seeing and thinking.
Thank you, Peter.
Hi, yeah, I'm Peter Garside. I work at EE, which is a UK mobile network which was bought by BT a number of years ago. And my responsibilities are head of charge to bill, which includes direct carrier billing. And I also look after digital ID APIs, which we monetize externally to help prevent fraud.
Thanks, everybody. So a great panel of experts here to talk about the biggest regulatory change in a decade. And everyone's probably thinking, oh, my gosh, the UK, you are obsessed with regulation. And we are a bit because we've had to be. There was a quote yesterday. Someone said, I wrote it down, the looming threat of regulatory disruption. And there's been, I know it's strong. I liked it a lot. It was in the morning. And, we've had that over the last 5 years or so. Lots of regulatory change, inconsistency, disruption, some of it, most of it for the good, to be honest. So why the really scary title if we're coming towards the end of this journey? Well, because there is a significant change coming in regulation. However, it does symbolise the end of quite a long journey. So what our panel here are going to talk about is why now is a really great time to get involved in the UK, why now the time is right, really. We're going to address changes in the regulation, tell you what you need to know, and talk about the collaborative approach that we have in the UK. So I'm going to kick off by asking Peter. I've just talked about regulatory disruption. A lot's changed in the last 5 years. Are you able to sort of summarise for people how we've got here, what's happened and how it's impacted the sector and the consumer?
Yeah, I can do. So from a M&O point of view, from EE's perspective, obviously regulation is very important, but at the end of the day, it comes down to how our customers feel, how our customers respond to third-party content. And, we have to keep a close eye on that. And over the years, that's what we've done. One of the ways that we've done that has been to look at complaints and complaints data and to see what's going on there. Can we analyse that? Can we see if there's any types of services that have caused more complaints than others? Are there, do single purchase make more, do we have more complaints on single purchase or subscriptions? Or do we have more complaints in certain sectors, competition's causing problems, for example. So we look at all of that, and through that we analyse it and come up with ideas on how to make those changes. What's happened is that other networks have done a similar thing, right? So you kind of got to a situation whereby we would have a rule book, Vodafone would have a rule book, O2 would have a rule book, and then the regulator would have their own rule book. So there's a million rule books out there, and it became a very difficult environment for people to, coordinate and to know what to do. But over the last few years, I would say, actually through, sensible measures in the industry, the level of complaints have actually come down a hell of a lot, and they've come down by over 90% since I've been involved. And I think the regulation, for example, Code 15, it was really focused on outcomes. Code 14 was focused on outcomes, and then it went to standards after that. But the reality is that a lot of the market was cleared up before that, in any case. So a lot of the complaints had gone down. So even though it was a big change and it was an important code change, from a complaints perspective, a lot of the industry had already done the hard work. So they'd kind of come ahead of actually the regulation. And obviously now we've got potential a new regulator going from the PSA, the Phone Paying Services Authority, to Ofcom. And that kind of change is happening. It's been happening for about 2 years. It's been happening for a while. But the reality, right, is that there are fundamental differences in Code 15, and there will be fundamental differences in the statutory instrument. But the reality on the day is, from your day-to-day work, is that the MNOs have still got to do the due diligence in any case, before or after this change. So I kind of think, from my perspective, even though there are certain things we have to do, the regulation has been stable for a while, and that's because the complaints have been stable for years, really. Yeah. So I don't think there's going to be much change in that status. So it is kind of working now, and even though there's a new kind of framework, I think it's pretty a stable environment.
Yeah, it has been actually. After quite a lot of change, complaints came down a few years ago, didn't they, really? So, the PSA put in a new code of practice back in April 2022, I think. So, bearing that in mind, the PSA have done a good job, industry's done a good job. David, was it a surprise then all of a sudden with the new code of practice, the PSA announced they were wrapping up, exiting stage left, and we were going to have a brand new regulator?
I think when the news first came in, Joanna, I fell off my seat because to think of that big shift away from a regulatory agency that you'd had in the market for so long, I just didn't expect that to happen. But it's the right thing, and when you think about where we were with complaints, absolutely it shouldn't be a surprise, and for once it was the right direction of travel. Pete's alluded to all the drops in complaints. And that has come very much from the self-regulatory aspects that we've adopted in the UK. When I first joined the industry, 16 odd years ago, PSA were doing all of the legwork. And their approach was find something wrong, sit on it for a long time, collect the complaint data, be able to really punish them so they learn never to do that again. And all that bred was a lot of dissatisfied consumers complaining, and then PSA saying, we've got all the complaints to justify that you need a regulator. And then we had the mobile network approach, which was, we see an issue, we close it down, consumers are no longer harmed, and we move forward. And And that is why I think both the higher standards, expectations, and setting out what good looks like, and then the industry taking the lead in policing itself, led to the outcome we've got now, which is lower complaints, hopefully a lighter touch regulator.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot that globally we can learn from that. They always say those that don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. And what we see is that the UK is often regulatory-wise where it all happens first, and then every other market follows. So I guess there's a decision to be made. We heard yesterday about go to the Middle East because there's no regulation. That is just not the approach I think that the stable companies we have, mature companies in the industry want. They want a stable market, and if you want a stable market that is still commercially viable, then set reasonable standards now yourself, abide by those standards, and we can hopefully prevent the boom and bust that we saw in the UK by going straight to a marketplace that is well regulated by the mobile networks, the aggregators and the CSPs all working together towards a stable market that brings in money for the long term.
Thanks, David. And actually, as an aggregator, Victoria, do you see the opportunity here with someone new taking over the regulatory piece?
Yes, of course. I think having the PSA being absorbed into Ofcom will lead to the stability that you were talking about, David. I think any good player in the market wants stability and something to grow, a stable foundation, and that's what we're going to see going into Ofcom is the end of regulation. I think in terms of change of regulation, that's it. We've reached the end of the road with regulation in terms of the UK, and we won't see any more change. It's going to be stable for a long time, and that's quite exciting from our point of view because there's no more just interpreting codes and interpreting the PSA code 15. It's now more, it's not subjective like it was before, it's more prescriptive.
It'll be a legal document.
It's prescriptive, and in a way it does maybe stifle innovation slightly, but to be honest, I think the pages are the pages. I don't think you're going to be able to change, unless, as we were talking about earlier, some big technological change that, brings a new type of DCB or whatever that might be next. We're not going to see, this is what it is that's now, and that's what it's going to be like for a number of years.
So talking about innovation there, Victoria, Peter, do you think, there's going to be opportunities for growth? Or actually, are you seeing growth already?
So we are seeing growth. So since the kind of reduction in the number of complaints that we've had, in direct carrier billing, we've seen really good growth over the last few years, and it's grown every year. So it has been good. So I think that will continue. And I think what companies need is stability, right? So they don't need rule changes all the time. They don't need to have new opinions about flows necessarily. It's all about keeping that consistency, keeping everybody aware of what they need to do to enter the UK market. And I think that's where we are. So we are seeing growth now, and just because of the change from the PSA to Ofcom and the statutory instrument, I don't see a reason why the growth won't continue.
Leon, I appreciate that we haven't heard from you yet, so I'm going to ask you two questions, in fact. One is whether you, sitting as a merchant, see an opportunity in the new regime. And secondly, as an experienced merchant, we're moving to a different regulatory model. What should merchants be doing to prepare for it? So do you see opportunity, and what should you be doing to prepare for it?
Well, I don't really see an opportunity. What I see is, but of course there's an opportunity, but what I see is a market where we really like to be there, because it is very well regulated. And thank you, David, you mentioned it is very important for merchants to be in a playing field where there are clear regulations. The only way how you can accomplish that perfectly is by collaborating, by working together. So it just doesn't require a regulator who puts a set of rules on the table and everybody has to comply to the rules, because that's not dynamic. We need the dynamics of MNOs, aggregators and merchants, also merchants talking with each other, work in working groups to pick up problems, to avoid problems, and the whole way of collaboration I'm describing now is what I see in a lot of markets, but the UK is a perfect example of that. Is there an opportunity? Yes. For us, it's not a big change, actually. It just will be more simple. It's simplified. And there are a few improvements, actually, but you'll get back to that later. Probably you will ask me something about the the KYC procedure. That's a positive thing. That's an opportunity. Because for us as a merchant, it's also important that the other players in the market are all working together to keep the market clean, to keep consumer harm away, and to have nice business, everybody. And you only need one wrong player and not a good regulatory framework to make it go wrong.
Yeah.
And that's, in the end, not in our best interest.
So for you then, you haven't got to do much to prepare for the change in regulator, because actually you're doing it already. And if you're compliant in the UK now, you're going to be compliant under the change of regulation.
Exactly.
So nothing to be scared of there.
No, that's the opportunity indeed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that we voluntarily do, other parties might not do. There's also probably potentially some bad actors that we didn't see around in the UK because it's too complicated for them. Great.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. One of the big changes actually under the Ofcom statutory instrument is it will be a legal document, and it does have a slightly different approach to risk than the PSA Code 15 had, particularly with merchants, and obviously you already do all your risk assessments and so on. But Victoria, if there's a new merchant coming into the UK and they are looking at the statutory instrument and they are seeing that they now have an obligation to run risk assessments and regularly check their level of risk, what sort of things can you offer them in the way of help to do so?
So we have an in-house compliance team that we can work with merchants with, but not only that, we have a great collaborative approach in terms of aimm, the working groups. We talk to the MNOs, we talk to MCP, the compliance houses, we talk to merchants. So we have a very collaborative approach to the new statutory instrument, what it's going to look like and how merchants can come into the market. There are lots of documents. I'm not going to say the phrase that I said before because that wouldn't be good.
Death by documentation was the phrase. Documentation.
But we have so many documents that we're building a little bit of a Bible almost, isn't it? Yeah. Where we have we can help you from all angles. That we've got MCP's documentation, we've got documentation through aimm, through working groups, and actually we just all work together. So dates are always out for new things that you can sit on working groups with aimm. So yeah, I think if you're coming into the UK market, we can help you, and start with us, and then we will kind of softly bring you the rest bit by bit.
In a non-scary way.
And then, yes, as possible. We're selling it, aren't we, Joe?
Part of risk is obviously due diligence. That's been big in the UK actually for some time. But it is something that people coming into the UK will need to consider. So they'll need to think about who they're partnering with. And Ofcom do have a bit of a focus on that. Now, the MNOs have been doing due diligence for a long time and obviously do it really well. Do you think this focus on due diligence from Ofcom should be a stumbling block for people coming to the UK, Peter?
I don't think it should be a stumbling block. It's something that they obviously should be aware of. It kind of affects everybody in the value chain. So it's not just the MNOs who need to do the due diligence, which we have been doing, but it's the L1s, the aggregators, the gateway, I think was another term I learnt yesterday, and obviously the merchants. So it is for everybody, and in terms of Ofcom, Ofcom is the regulator in the UK, so all the mobile networks are kind of used to kind of dealing with Ofcom. That is the majority of our conversations with the regulator in the UK. So we've had a lot of experience about what they need, what they want to see, what they're looking for. So yeah, we're quite comfortable that Ofcom's taking it over.
So the Ofcom consultation happened some time ago now, last Christmas I think it was, and we were ready for the statutory instrument to come out in June, but then the general election was called in the UK, so it's because it's a parliamentary process that's been put on hold for a little while. We're expecting it imminently, but I think the message is, before we move on to sort of changing tack a bit, the message is there is nothing to be scared of in terms of the biggest change of regulation in a decade. We just put that scary title in to woo you into the room. Actually, there is nothing to be scared of, but everyone on this panel is here to help. Before we move on, did anyone want to say anything else about regulation?
I'll just add, obviously all this documentation is ready for people, so if they want to just look at the UK market, just ask and we can provide all this information that's readily available for you, and that just means that you become familiar with it. You before all of this change happens, you've got all the documentation there, so feel free to just get in touch, download the code 15 from the PSA website while that's still there, because that's roughly where the statutory instrument's going to go. So I just think if you want to consider the UK, download the documentation or reach out to us and ask.
Okay, thank you. So,
yeah, I think the point is that Ofcom basically wrote the 15th code. They were working hand in hand with PSA at the time, so their mindset is very much within the blood and the veins of that document, and that's why I think we can be fairly confident that there is not going to be a big shift in focus, just a change of how it's administered. And as you say, downloading the guidance, I think particularly, is going to be the right thing to do. There's a bit of a lack of clarity over how much guidance Ofcom will give on the new code. So bearing in mind that the PSA code is the mindset, get those documents quick, because they will still be a valid way to interpret via the mind of the regulator.
And David, you raise a good point actually, which is that it was the actual chap who wrote Code 15 is the same chap who put together the statutory instrument. So he, we believe, wrote Code 15 with a mindset of mapping it across as sort of as similarly as possible. So yeah, do grab those documents if you want to, but equally, if you don't want to wade through a load of stuff yourself, just ask the question of one of us and we will absolutely help you. So, changing tack a bit, and perhaps an example that I wanted to give of another way that we work really collaboratively in the UK, and I think collaboration was yesterday's word, but I'm bringing it into today. I wanted to talk about one of our working groups that we've launched fairly recently with MCP, actually, which is around Google Ads. I know we've got friends from Google in the room. Hello. So, David, if I could just ask you firstly to explain the purpose of the working group.
Yeah, so I think there was a twin track reason for why we wanted to get this guidance out there, partly to give some clarity around the expectations of advertising in the UK market. PSA were starting to take a look at some of the advertising, their sort of last-ditch attempt, I guess, why they still had some power to show that they left a legacy, and that was very focused around the download style advertising. At the same time, we were seeing Google were also starting to close down advertising for other reasons. The quality of the advertising was certainly one of a plethora of other, and potentially some of them technical, reasons for cut-off. So we thought this document would be a great way to encapsulate all of that, so anyone new into the market could get a head start and hopefully avoid problems. So I guess that's where we are now, is most of the way to a first draft of that document, but that will be a live document, so as we find out more and as things evolve, we can start to change that and make sure that is the font of truth.
I like the font of truth very much. Are you able to explain just a little bit more about what we're thinking about putting in the document and what our thinking is around that framework? Yeah,
sure. So we've tried to sort of map out, particularly around Google Ads, some of the challenges with responsive banners, particularly where you want to get key information that has to be presented. I mean, this is for the UK, but this is good practice in any market where you're dealing with Google responsive banners, just to map out how and where key information should be put to guarantee it's always displayed. Understanding also the placements on the page and how different ways that an ad may be displayed, and therefore, whilst an advert on its own may look compliant, to understand the context as well, and the fact that that advert, if it's put in such a way that surrounding information on the page in the consumer's mind can be translated to that ad, that's potentially where the big issues were coming through. And that may be an area where providers, merchants out there are placing adverts in good faith, but then further down the line, that may come back to bite them. So just understanding those risks. The obvious one is for download now. If you stick that kind of banner underneath some Hollywood content on a website, the consumer's naturally going to think, I want that Hollywood film, that's how I get it. And then obviously they get, I don't know, sports videos instead. You can see where the complaints are going to come through.
Thanks, David. That's really clear. I mean, actually, it sounds, David, like you've got it all wrapped up. So we could just use a one-man solution. But Victoria, actually, why is it important that industry get together in a working group rather than just saying, David, can you sort that out for us? What can industry do here together?
So what was interesting, I think, about that working group was that it was actually merchant-led, if I remember. Yeah. It was a merchant that wanted that to be raised and for us to work collaboratively to fix what they could see was happening, which was really interesting. So I think, again, I keep going back to collaborative. It's just all of the industry in the UK, I feel like we're always slightly ahead of the curve. Maybe not so much with the Netherlands, that we were talking about that before, and you guys are self-regulated, but I just feel that we listen. We're listening to the merchants, we're listening and we're intervening before we're working before anything can go be raised by the PSA. We're kind of ahead of the game, working with merchants, listening on the ground, and then taking it from there, which is I think a really good approach and a proactive. We're much more proactive than we used to be. So yeah, I think. That answer the question?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
No, it did answer the question. And actually, it's about having all those different brains, very clever brains in the room, isn't it, to pull all those ideas together. As a merchant, Leon, and it was merchant-led, you're absolutely right, you are then in a room, be it a virtual room or an actual room, with your competitors, of course. So how useful is that? Is this kind of working group? Is it something that you think, I'm not too sure about this sort of approach with my competitors, or do you find that sort of working group useful?
Yeah, it's very useful, absolutely. Like, for example, the issue with the responsive ads. Key information not being displayed because settings or wrong approach. It's not something you want, it's something you want to fix, you don't know how to fix it. In a working group, you can figure this out. You have all the brains there, indeed. And it sounds maybe a bit lame, but some competitors are just friends because you can share information, help each other, keep the playing field where you're all working in. I mean, there's plenty of potential subscribers for everybody, but you don't want things to go wrong, and you need each other to have the playing field clean. It's the same indeed, like you referred to the Netherlands, like you all sit together, work together. We also have in the Netherlands a participants meeting where we sit around the table with our competitors and trying to discuss how we fix problems or how we change the code of conduct to avoid this or that. So it's absolutely no problem, no.
That's good. So
and very helpful work groups. Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. No, you're absolutely right. And, we talk at the beginning of every working group about how actually we're coming together. We're not going to be giving across sensitive or competitive information, but we're actually coming together as a group of people within industry at all levels in the value chain to try and solve a problem, because by sharing that knowledge and experience, you're not giving away your trade secrets, you're actually helping the industry and therefore, your business to thrive. So bearing in mind we've got the regulatory model, Peter, that Ofcom that's going to come in, And we've got this sort of level of, I don't want to call it self-regulation, but I guess it kind of is, this collaborative approach. Do you think that's a useful extra layer, or should we just be, in the UK, leaving the regulation to the regulators?
Well, I think it's a team game, really. I think everybody needs to be involved, because it's everyone's interests are affected by it. So, and I think it's obviously value as well to the regulator. So I think we all need to contribute. We all need to participate in the various forums that obviously that AIM are running, but also consultations that the industry or the PSA have run in the past. It's really important to give that feedback to educate them your kind of understanding of the market from where you sit. What do you understand? So yeah, that's got to be the M&Os, the merchants, the gateways, the compliance houses, and the regulator all talking together, because that's the only way you can really get the best regulation, and get that correct balance between regulation. Too much, you don't want too much regulation, you don't want too little, but you need to try and find that sweet spot, and only as an industry can you find that.
So it's not really about over-regulation, more about making regulation as user-friendly as possible by sharing all that best practice and that knowledge and agreeing those standards across the chain.
And we don't, as I said at the beginning, we want to try and simplify everything as much as we can, because we don't want to be in a position where there's a million different ideas about what regulation could be. We want to try and distill that, and by collaborating, talking together, then you can start to distill it. Then it's easier for the merchants to launch services.
Thank you. Okay, so just really then some sort of closing remarks, if that's okay, from each of you about why it's the right time to come to the UK now. So I'll go over to my colleague in a very colourful dress.
Thank you, Joanna. I think now is the right time, because, in fact, we've been given a little bit of extension of time, it feels like. You've got the 15th code in place. We're not in the statutory instrument yet, so it feels like there's a practice run still available for merchants before it goes into law. So I think now is a really good time. It's an even playing field, so for the good merchants with good services, the UK is the market for you, because you will be on an even playing field with others, and you will have a stable base and death by documentation.
That sounds really, really enticing. Leon?
Yeah, I'm not going to tell everybody like, hey, come to the UK, I need more competitors.
Yeah.
But of course,
that's fair.
but of course, it is nice if other people enter the market and they go for this regulatory framework. They're probably very great competitors, and we're looking forward to talk to our potentially new competitors, and happy to share information, see each other in working groups. All welcome, but you don't need to.
Not too many. David?
Yeah, I think we've been through all the teething problems now, so it's a great time to come on board when things like the due diligence will hopefully be able to go through very quickly, any issues mitigated easily, and be able to get launched and stable. And I think it's that stable word that strikes me as why the UK is a good place to be. Once you've got the landing pages signed off by the networks, then you know that you're not going to be pulled over the coals for problems, and you can bring that money in. It's a good time. I mean, I talked about earlier about globally. We've just seen in UAE Etisalat switching off all new acquisitions for the same issues that we've just discussed around download now banners. So those kind of issues, I'd hope, of just suddenly losing all that revenue overnight and losing all the investment in advertising that you put behind that, shouldn't be a factor in the UK. So come make money in a stable market.
Thanks, David. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we're growing. The PSA, when they do their forecasting, they predicted growth as well in carrier billing. and also the reality is that the complaints have come down and they're continuing to come down. So the truth of it is lower complaints, more growth. I mean, it sounds unbelievable, but that's the reality of where we are.
Marvellous, thank you. So yeah, I guess in summary then, you know, the UK has long been known as being heavily regulated, robustly regulated, going through a period of regulatory change, a bit tricksy, maybe one to avoid for now. Hopefully what you've got out of this session is actually the time is now to come. If you are interested in the UK, come and talk to any of us, all of us, one of us, about how you can get involved, and we're more than happy to follow up when we're back in the UK if you don't manage to grab us today. But I want to say thank you very much to my panel of experts for being so eloquent about why the UK is such a fabulous place to be. Does anybody have any questions? They're all writing down must enter UK. Thank you.
Thank you.